Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made.
Sounds like you forgot.
No,
I'm Ross, creative director at Epic Made, and we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Justin Ahrens of Rule 29 and the Creative Shit Show podcast, Ian Garlick of Video Case Story, and Rebecca Blake of the Graphic Artists Guild.
All right, we are forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast and are always looking for more sponsors. That said, Pixel Retentive is always brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a team of artists and strategists with a mastery of visual storytelling. Our studio makes unforgettable animation and graphic illustration infused with ideas that put money in your pocket. We best serve marketers and brands seeking to engage nerdy millennials, and some of our favorite clients include Nickelodeon, WWE, and Sci-Fi. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign.
You can tell I accidentally put you on the back foot. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good, bro. I'm just stuttering around a bit today, but we're here. We made it.
So speaking of, with us today, we have Maurice Cherry. Welcome, Maurice.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Maurice is a designer, strategist, and podcaster in his own right, located in Atlanta, Georgia. He is principal and creative director at Lunch, an award-winning multidisciplinary studio that he created back in 2008. He is also the creator and host of Revision Path, a platform and podcast that showcases Black designers, developers, and digital creatives from all over the world. Pleasure to have you, man.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, like, your podcast, I mean, what are you at, like 300 and something episodes now?
No, we're past 500. We're actually working this week that we're recording. We're producing episode 525, but we've recorded up through 530.
And you guys had, like, go ahead.
This is the anniversary, or more or less, by the time this episode comes out, you'll have passed your, 10-year anniversary?
Oh, yeah. Our 10-year anniversary was back in April.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
amazing.
So 10 years, yeah.
That is a serious commitment, friend. And now you're in the Smithsonian Archive or something as well, right?
Yeah, there's a selection of our episodes. They're part of the permanent archive at the Smithsonian Institute for the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
That is a huge accomplishment, friend. But I mean, you know that. So, but now our audience does too. So, all right, before we jump into today's topic, I wanted our audience to get to know you a little better. So the question we ask all of our guests at the beginning of the show is, how long have you been in your industry and what project are you most proud of so far?
Oh, how long have I been in the industry? That's a great question. I feel like I was in the industry before it was an industry. I mean, my first paid content gigs online were in the 90s. We're in 98 and 99. And I got my first like freelance design work was in 2000. So we'll start at 2000. We'll say 23 years. We can round it up to 25. But I've been creating content online in a number of different formats for a very long time. Started out mostly as text. I've now largely moved into audio, but I've done some video work as well. So I've really been fortunate to be able to be a part and see how the industry and technology and design and everything has sort of changed over the years. My favorite project, if I really had to think about it, I would say my favorite one is probably the Black Weblog Awards, which I started back in 2005. Started that in 2005. It went on until 2010, where I sold it, and another company kept it going until 2017. But I would say that was my favorite because of just it was sort of this perfect crucible of the internet and blogging and social media, like really just starting to take off. Mm-hmm. And the fact that mainstream media had not yet keyed into what all of this was about. And when I say all of, mainly just mean technology and the internet and stuff. And so it was sort of at a time where you could really control the conversation. You could be a part of the conversation. This is pre-algorithms. This is pre social media curation of that nature. So things really did grow organically. I mean, we managed to get, kind of like media spots from the Washington Post, from NPR, et cetera. And so to be noticed during a time like that when so many other things were happening. I mean, I'll always look back at that time like super fondly. Also, because I was like in my 20s, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I was 25 when I started the Black Weblog Awards. I had no idea what I was doing. Was really just like, can I curse on this show?
Oh yeah.
I was just throwing shit together, just like trying to figure out how. I mean, like every year traffic would quadruple, and I would have to try to figure out how to do. Okay, how do I build the web form? This is back when web forms were still, CGI-bin. Like it's it was just such a wild time to try to create, and I don't know. Things are a lot different now. I think things are better now, just in terms of the access to tools and such. But
Right.
Those early heady days were really like some like run and gun type shit. It was fun.
Yeah, the lower barrier to entry comes with the, double-edged sword of everyone's there now, right? So like, that's the nature of technology. Interesting. That sounds really cool. So what was that about? Like what
What was it about? Yeah, so the Black Weblog Awards was really, I started it in I don't want to say in protest. It's not the right way to put it. I started it because I knew that there were Black bloggers, and this is like pre-podcasting, actually. I think it was just called audio blogging back then, but I knew people that were doing videos and audio and blogging, and they just weren't getting any sort of recognition from it. In the climate that I started it, there were two other kind of larger blog awards. One was called the Weblog Awards, and then the other one was also called the Weblog Awards, but they sort of shortened their name to the Bloggies, and they were affiliated with South by Southwest. They would do this live ceremony every March. And I remember one time looking at one of the categories, I think it was like best African, Middle Eastern, or Mediterranean blog, and there was not a single person of color that was a nominee. And I'm like,
oh wow,
how? That can't be right. And so I figured I would just honestly do it to say like, hey, I know there are people that are out there blogging. I was a blogger myself, and I had many friends that were blogging. And so I really just started it to just sort of like give, homage to like, oh, these are people that are doing like really great work. I knew folks that were designers. I knew folks that were like bloggers with Urban Box Office back in the early 2000s and doing this kind of work, and they just weren't getting any kind of recognition for it at all whatsoever, not even from like Black media. They weren't getting any sort of recognition. And so that was sort of the environment in which I wanted to start the awards. And they started off very basic, very bare bones. People could email in their
nominee,
mail in their nominations and things like that. And it was just a really fun time to kind of pull it all together, because at least at that time, no one had seen anything to that nature in the general blogosphere that was strictly about celebrating what Black people were doing. And so that was the whole environment that it started in.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And I'm glad you, stood up and did that, man. And, civil rights has a lot of history in Atlanta. So I assume that was, some inspiration on your side in terms of just growing up around knowing some of that stuff. I assume. But.
Well, I mean, I'm from just a kind of, it's funny you mentioned the civil rights. I'm from Selma.
Okay.
So
even better.
Even better. I mean, I grew up in an environment where we always knew about Bloody Sunday at the Edmund Pettus Bridge and Martin Luther King Jr. And I mean, my social studies teacher, I remember it's either 4th or 5th grade, like took us to a field trip downtown and showed us a spot on the pavement where her blood was, where she was attacked,
Wow.
It was always something, I mean, just in terms of like celebrating what Black people were doing and our accomplishments and such, was always just kind of in the forefront of most work that I did. I would say back then, certainly in the early days, was really a big part of that, was wanting to sort of honor that legacy. And yeah, being in Atlanta, of course, doesn't hurt, because there are so many examples of Black excellence here. You can see Black people at every socioeconomic level. They're in positions of power, they're in politics, they're captains of industry, and all that is really inspiring. So I wanted to give some sort of recognition to what I saw was the kind of new age of media that was happening online. blogging and, like I said, audio blogging, video blogging. Just wanted to give some recognition to those people because the mainstream outlets at the time weren't doing that, and the niche outlets weren't really doing it either. And so I figured, why not? It was just the kind of environment where you could say why not and then just do it. And that still exists now. Like, I still think that feeling of wanting to just create something from nothing is still evident now. But back then it was just so, I don't know, it was just different. I can't really put my finger on why.
Well, it was like you said it before, it was the Wild West, right? Like, it was a new frontier before.
Mm-hmm.
Now like regardless of whether or not you go into it consciously knowing this or unconsciously, you're aware of what is and isn't possible in the environment, right? Like, you know that you could become an influencer, you know that you could do a podcast, you know that you have these resources, like these frameworks that you can work within, right?
Yeah.
And I think that whether you're aware of it or not, it's safer feeling to get into the internet nowadays because so many people have been successful in that arena. Whereas before, when you're doing it, it was so new that it was unknown whether or not it could be a career path or it could be like a worthwhile endeavor if you were just kind of speaking in an echo chamber.
That's true. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. That actually gets into the topic that I wanted to discuss with you. I mean, you have quite the pedigree of discussing career paths and, just the legacies and careers of designers and creatives all over the world, specifically Black creators and designers with a revision path. And I wanted to focus in the podcast on that today, just kind of opening the door to maybe some paths or opportunities that some creatives or designers may not realize are out there.
Okay.
So for us, graphic design is mostly, either within the context of web or, advertising and things like that. Have you met anyone who's using, their design skills for something that's, let's say unconventional?
Unconventional.
So beyond like, business cards, letterheads, websites, things like that.
Like strictly visual design?
Let's open it up to anything you got.
Well, it's funny because I was actually just discussing this with another colleague recently about how content. I'm saying mostly written content because I do feel like the term content kind of
been hijacked.
Audio, video, and text into just like this, like blob of whatever. This sort of amorphous concept of content, but it's interesting how much written content and text has become now part of the lexicon of design. Like back in the day, really more in the domain of copywriters, editors. Like, yeah, if you were a designer that knew how to write, or if you were a designer that could edit copy, that was great. It was almost sort of expected that you would do that. And it's just an interesting sort of shift now where there's like content strategists are a big part of design teams. Writers are a part of design teams now. And before, it felt like that really didn't used to be the case.
Right.
I feel like that's an interesting sort of way that people are using their design skills. That's not visual design. I mean, there is a lot that has to go into content design when you think about typography, hierarchy, the flow of information architecture. These are things that now I think would be condensed into perhaps UX. And that's sort of a greater amplification of this is how UX now encompasses a lot of non-visual things that are considered design. So I feel like that's one thing. Another way also is another, I guess, sort of way that people are using design in a kind of unconventional way is what we're seeing now a lot with audio interfaces, with smart speakers, things of that nature. Conversational design is now a thing where you're designing these user flows for how someone will talk to a smart speaker or a digital get information, like scripting out those flows. Like you don't do that in Photoshop or Illustrator. That's a different type of design. So I think also just as technology grows, we're going to see design being used in so many different sorts of aspects. Now the big thing is generative AI, machine learning. We've got AR, we've got VR, we've got mixed reality. So design is starting to be taken into other dimensions and platforms outside of just, a poster or a website, or which I think is pretty interesting, because it brings more questions as to what is truly designed.
Yeah.
And what are ways that we can maybe take these skills, even if it is like a visual design skill, and maybe transfer that into another part of design. Like design is starting to become a big umbrella that encompasses a lot of things that before that really wasn't the case.
For sure. I've seen like graphic design in particular be a real kind of like foundational gateway to like so many other visual careers. And I think that's, still going to be the case for at least a little while. But it's interesting to me that like, graphic design is like that base level thing, and it doesn't have the trade value as in our professions as a more honed in specific skill, right? But when you add in fundamentals of graphic design to any visual career path, any visual artist or visual designer, animation, illustration, all the different ways that you can make cool things. Like if you understand graphic design and visual hierarchy and type and fontography and how to lay things out in a way that makes sense, like I see that adding so much value. And so many people started as just doing graphic design, and then they got excited about a specific visual medium and leaned all those skills into there and then added other skills on top of it. I know I personally see that a lot, especially at AIGA and the Graphic Artists Guild, and talking to people through those channels. So interesting thoughts there, but
yeah, man. And honestly, going to like what you're saying with like Alexa or the Google equivalent, or I'm trying not to activate any of my
but like specifically muted mine for this conversation.
Like the information hierarchy thing, and like understanding how people ask for information, inquire about information, and want to receive information, like all that stuff is definitely it's sort of a subconscious superpower that you get from entering into design in general. And I don't think anyone would ever think, or like I think the average person would probably never think that a designer could get into even like prompt engineering for generative AI, right? And have a better understanding than just your average person, because they're used to controlling the flow of information already.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I think, also with, I don't know, the digital assistants are really interesting because it's not only just that we are talking to them, but also the context in which we're talking to them. Like there's going to be a difference using a virtual assistant or a smart assistant or whatever at home versus if you're out just in public, or if you're in your car or something like that. So then that adds like another layer of context to, just how you would interface with it, how you would interact with it. I remember early on with Google Assistant, I don't know if Siri was like this or not, but it would have trouble with accents. And so if you had a particularly, thick accent, or if you had an accent that wasn't, I don't know, like proper English.
Right.
Yeah. Sure. It would struggle with that. It wouldn't understand. And then you get frustrated with it. Like, why doesn't this thing work? And
yeah, there are colloquialisms that
right. And eventually it will get better. They have gotten better. But they're still, they're not perfect. So it's still something that needs to be iterated on.
Oh yeah. And going back into like the context of which you're in which you're viewing media is very similar to the AI or the virtual assistant thing, right? Like we have to do that with animation, where you might, if you're viewing it on your phone versus viewing it on a computer screen versus viewing it on, any any sort of context to which you're digesting or using the tool changes a lot of variables on how it needs to be designed, in the same way that a virtual assistant being used at home versus being used at work, both of those things need to be considered when designing them.
Right. Absolutely.
It's really interesting with the whole dawn of generative AI, how people are both overvaluing and devaluing design and art at the same time. It's almost like a weird paradox where you have people with one breath saying, "Oh, this thing is going to do what you guys can do with the click of a button," right? But then you have those same people turn around and say, "Oh, well, this doesn't, this works better when a designer is using it."
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
the synthetic media is something that, and I've talked about this on. It's actually been sort of a running thing on Revision Path for the past 2 years now. Like I usually will ask guests in some capacity with the creative work or the tech work that they do, how these tools, like, do they use them? Do they like them? Do they have an opinion, etc.? I get what you're saying about the overvaluing and the devaluing. I remember when people were getting those like AI profile pictures made, and in one aspect, people would of course share them because they're like, "Oh, look at how it depicted me." But then other people would say, "I can't believe you paid for that. You paid for that? You paid for that?" And would be surprised that you would, and it would often be a very low. It'd be like $8 or something like that.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't a lot of money, but people are like, "I can't believe you paid for that. I wouldn't pay for that." But they would do it for free, and then if they do it for free, then they complain about the quality of it, and it's like it's such a weird sort of conversation around it. But yeah, you're starting to see now synthetic media creep into, like, I've seen it all across social media, people generating, pictures with Midjourney or what have you, and putting it out there. Of course, now there's technology where you can use synthetic media to make video. I mean, I think deepfake videos have been around for a while anyway. The technology has certainly gotten a lot more commonplace now. People are making fake videos, and I saw one a couple of months ago using a political ad. Like, there's going to have to be some greater literacy among people to be able to determine between synthetic media and authentic media.
Yeah.
Because it's already out there and it's already being used. I think specifically, even just to get it out of a visual aspect. Planet Money had a whole episode that was done with an AI voice. They had one of their hosts' voice sort of created through this tech startup called Well Said Labs, created basically a synthetic voice, and they did a whole episode with that voice. It's like, these things are no longer like Black Mirror science fiction. Like, it's happening right now. And at the speed that it's happening, it's only going to be used more unless there's some sort of guardrails or something around it.
Right.
Which certain companies have. Certain companies have codes of ethics and such behind it. But what I'm definitely finding is that the average person, I think, still can't really determine, particularly if it's an image. I think a video is a little bit different. But still images, people are still like, "Wait a minute, is that AI? I can't really tell."
Yeah. I'm just thinking about so I'm gonna get more prevalent with social media. Hopefully by the time this airs, I will have already started that journey, but or picked it up again. But one of the things I'm considering is like a creative director trying to determine if something is or isn't AI, right?
Just as the regular content, that'd be fun.
Yeah, and just as like one-off content every now and then, like a reaction style thing. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, it's weird how designers and illustrators and animators, like, they see it differently than the average person. Like, the someone who is not in the art field, they're significantly more willing to accept synthetic media as just, that was created, great, move on.
Well, they're consuming it the same as non-synthetic.
They're consuming it exactly the same. And so it's super interesting to see how that starts to influence mass opinion about things when you start seeing this stuff used in political ads, when you start seeing it used for, soap ads and things that, like, right now it's too niche to use in. Yeah,
Sure.
it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, I in that same vein, like, I don't know how we fix the education side of that, right? Like, people already don't have any idea. The people at large are already terrible at discerning, fact from reality. We saw that in the last administration quite frequently. And whatever you think about that last administration aside, people had a hard time discerning truth from reality, fact and lies. Sorry, truth from lies. That's only, as this technology evolves, it's only going to get better and better and better, to the point where people like us will even have a hard time going, that was a made up video. Did you see all that weird stuff going on over here in the peripheral? Like, in the meantime, like, they're fun to watch, some of these things. But politics is going to get crazy, man. I don't want to go all over the map there, but that's going to be, I'm terrified of this next election.
We've already started to see some backlash to it. I mean, Marvel Studios, for example, their
with the Secret Invasion.
Yeah, that entire intro was AI, and I mean, the show itself was bad, but then the fact that the intro was also bad, like it sort of, I don't know, it felt like a real low point for Marvel, which I feel like in terms of visual excellence, in terms of their movies and shows, has always tried to be more on the high end, like they tried to set the bar. And this just felt like a particular low.
Yeah. I mean, think about what they did with She-Hulk. Like, they had a humongous budget. They just threw money at She-Hulk and it looked underfunded. Like, that's like, how did that happen? Right? Like that's crazy, right? They literally were setting records for spending money on this shit. I mean, maybe not like all-time records, but it was crazy. And then it still looked underproduced. And Disney, we talked about this in the last episode. Disney's in a rough spot right now. They're literally losing money. They don't appear to have the magic, even though they've purchased all the best everything that there ever was in the history of creativity in the world, like, and entertainment. But like, clearly that isn't all you need, right? So like, what's going on with the culture? What's going on with like the internal processes, the brain trust that they purchased with, Pixar, that like put out excellence, like Pixar shit excellence for 25 years. They didn't drop a movie that didn't hit number one, literally like 20 movies in a row. Like, what has happened now since that leadership's gone? And where is there any legacy left of that? Like, it's all fascinating to me. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it creates I think it creates kind of an inherent fear when you are like choosing what you want to do as a creative, right? Where you're seeing all of these avenues either fail or get muddied by technology, right? Where maybe you wanted to work for Disney, maybe you wanted to work for, maybe you wanted to build websites, maybe you want to do all these things that like you're seeing technology kind of encroach on, or you're seeing, Netflix and, Hulu and even Spotify and all these places that were streaming, all these companies that were streaming content for so long, they're just hemorrhaging money. Like, there's only so long that they can last spending more money than they're making. And as they fail their consumers, they're losing them, which means they're hemorrhaging more money.
Right.
And so on and so forth. And so I think we're probably going to see a dawn of something similar to like the early 2000s or even early 2010s, where the individual creator will have more power because than they have in the last maybe 5 to 8 years, because you're going to see a lot of these larger companies who don't know what to do anymore.
Enter Web3 in the decentralized world.
I mean, we saw how quickly NFTs crashed and burned as a concept.
Yeah. Well, they didn't know. They crashed and burned as a hype tool for people to make quick money. But the core concept of Web3 is thriving and well. It just isn't mass adopted. You're seeing companies all the time taking little experiments still. PayPal just launched a stable coin, right? PayPal saying, hey, we need to get into this new economy. So while the PR campaign is, oh my God, Justin Bieber bought at the top of the market, and now his Bored Ape is worth $10. Like, it's really worth like 100,000. He could probably easily sell it for, $500,000 maybe at this point, because he bought it for like over 3 million. But the real deal here is those were all just flashy, exciting things that let people know that this technology existed. But now there's this underlying thing of, how do we have a more equitable economy for the creators of the world? How do we make sure that people have attribution permanently in the blockchain? How do we permanently assign royalties? How do we do all these things that will benefit the creator community? It's not there yet, but it's still boiling up. There's still a great bit of movement underneath the surface that isn't in, PR. The PR all went to, the limelight's all on AI now, like we talked about, which is fine. So,
okay.
but I mean, I could get on my soapbox about that. I love Web3. That was my soapbox record, but
yeah, Carl's been a relatively, I would say, adamant fan of all Web3 applications in general, since 2020, since it got mass adopted for like a year.
Yeah, I rode the hype train for a little while. I managed not to lose any money, which is good. I mean, I made some money. I lost the money that I made, but I didn't like lose anything important.
Didn't lose anything important.
I was doing good for a while, and then I bought some stupid meme coin like a jackass. Did the things I know not to do, and like, oh look, this thing's got some hype, and I got greedy and I lost some money. And that's the nature of the beast. But people want to get mad at the system or the speculation or how markets go when they do all the wrong things, right? It's like, oh, I bought a Bitcoin at $70,000 and now it's only worth 20. It's like, well, I mean, why would you sell at 20? Like, you did all the wrong things. If you bought one at 70 and it's down at 20, buy another one, and now it's half price. Like, you're hedging your bets there anyway. I don't want to get too deep in that, but yeah.
So bring it back. We've trailed slightly.
Easy to do.
Bring it back slightly. Maurice, what do you have any like best practices for someone looking to maybe find their lane in design or in creativity in general, based on the numerous numerous career paths you've been exposed to?
Oh, that's a great question, because one thing that I see, and I hate to see it, is that I see really talented designers get online and they're only making things for the algorithm. Mm-hmm. They're not making it for people. They're not even really making it for themselves. They might couch it in some sort of language that makes it seem like, oh, well, I'm doing this to express myself. But then in the same breath, we'll say, oh, well, I put this video out, it didn't get a lot of views. I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
To get the algorithm, or I put this design out and nobody, tweeted about it or whatever. And I would almost say at this point, like, if there's something that you're really passionate about, and this is probably antithetical, I mean, considering that we're doing this on the internet.
Sure.
Get off the internet. Go shopping around in real life first and see what people think about it. Talk to your friends. Go to in-person meetups. Don't let the algorithm influence your creativity. Because what I see will happen, I mean, I think we see this largely with video, is that creators pivot, and the pivoting is not based off of their own creative and artistic vision. They're trying to go where the algorithm might be pushing them into more, people's eyeballs in terms of viewership or things like that. They try to pivot to see what the algorithm is going to do instead of really doing something that they're passionate about. Mm-hmm. And I see that so much, and it hurts for me to see it, because it's like these people are so creative and they just are a slave to the algorithm, whether that's video. I see it in podcasting with audio. I don't necessarily see it a lot with visual design, but I mean, I think let's face it, Instagram is largely dead for discovery anyway.
The organic growth for sure. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like there's already less and less places to really get noticed and seen online. If you're trying to do it for social media, again, you're going to be subject to the algorithm in terms of who will actually see it. Like, you can put something out and the very people that are following you will never see it. So at this stage, I'm like, take it offline. I'm not saying never put it online.
Right.
But if you're really trying to find what that passion is and what's going to bring you that fire to want to continue doing it, like, get some real world traction first. Because if you're trying to just launch online and do it on the internet to try to make sure that it gets picked up by these algorithms and distributed in some mass fashion, like, it's a losing game, because the algorithms are always shifting and changing. They're going to shift and change for different platforms. They're going to shift and change, different times of year, etc. Like, I even see companies now that are they're strictly hiring content creators, not writers, not videographers, content creators. We want you to create something viral. We're looking for viral content creators. Like, just take it offline.
Yeah.
Get that passionate about what it is. And I'm starting to see more creatives, particularly digital creatives, digital visual creatives, do offline projects. Like, do something tactile. Like, I'm trying to think of some people that are doing it off the top of my head. Like making tea blends or woodworking or painting or something. Like, they're doing something not going to be put online for people to like and judge and share and that sort of thing. They're getting their passion from just doing the work offline and getting real world feedback that way. So that's what I would recommend at this point. Not to say that online is a bad place to share or anything like that, but you're just going to be subject to that. And because there's so much user generated content out there between social media and other sites, it's just much harder to get seen, much harder to get noticed, much harder for people to really take what you're doing and follow it. Whereas I think if you're doing it offline first and you get that following and you get that passion from it, once you migrate it online in some capacity, you won't feel so bad about it.
Right. Yeah. And it's crazy. So I mentioned earlier in the podcast that, like, I'm going to start again on social media in the relatively near future. And so I didn't have a social media following at all. Like, never posted a single thing on social media with any sort of professional context until 2020. Right. Like, I never did it. I basically, right out of college, I met Carl and started working with him, until the odd jobs no longer needed to happen. And I worked with Carl full time. And I became a professional within the ship that was Epic Made, right? I never needed an online vehicle. And so when 2020 hit and, we had a bunch of people staying inside and, there was the world was burning, it never really stopped, fortunately. But, I decided I was going to insulate myself by having a vehicle online, right? And I'm an incredibly, like, rational, level-headed, oriented person, right? And I knew, because I had never been online for so long, that there was a poison in doing it. There was a potential to be infected by the idea that people were going to judge your stuff. And I didn't think that I was going to fall into that. And it's crazy how it worms your way in, even if you're aware of it happening. Like, just this idea that, like, oh man, I've spent so much time on this thing and I did do it for me and I do love the way that it looks, and it's somehow been tainted by the fact that nobody cared about it. But I think the cosmic trick of the algorithm and social media, at least as it currently stands, is that it's not that no one cared about it, it's that nobody saw it.
Right.
Exactly. And I think those things are very easily confused, especially when you pour your soul into something and you're like, hey, I made this thing. I want to get validated that I am a good artist, that I'm a good professional, that, like, my work means something to somebody. And when nobody interacts with it, it's very easy to confuse indifference with exposure.
And like I said, that's the thing that I see again with creatives online, and it's heartbreaking because they make great work, but they feel like because it's not getting 100,000 views in 24 hours, then they're a failure.
Right.
And the reality is that these platforms have prioritized algorithms. And I mean, I'll put it like this. They have prioritized discovery in a way. However, it's not stuff that you want to see. Like I think we talked on Instagram, and you just scroll through your feed and it's ads, and it's like, I'm not following this person. I don't even see the people that I follow anymore. The flip side of that is that it's de-emphasizing direct connection with the people that are following us or the people that we want to see this stuff. And so it's just kind of tearing, I don't know, it's sort of tearing it's tearing the social part of social media apart.
Right.
I mean, more people now, I think Instagram did like this study where they were talking about how stories and DMs are up because no one's posting on the feed anymore.
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's like everyone is a lurker now. And that's not necessarily because they want to be, but because of how the platforms have prioritized putting other people's stuff in your face that you don't want to see.
And it's funny, you see the proof that this is happening is in the people who end up as overnight successes, right? Because the idea is like the whole the built-in trick is that when you see these people have these overnight successes, you think, oh, they did something with this video. Now, like, I need to replicate or I need to run after. When in reality, they just happened to get one video picked up by the algorithm, and then everybody else saw all the other stuff that they thought sucked because nobody fucking saw it. Right. And they get this avalanche of engagement because their stuff was good the whole time. They just happened to hit this one, like they put the needle through or they put the thread through the needle, and for that one time, and now the whole string is getting pulled through.
Yeah, it's funny. I've made hundreds of hours of content on Instagram and TikTok, and like the one video that gets me that goes viral was like I used a trending audio, and it was like, check out the bald filter, but like I'm actually bald, so it was just like I'm just like making this stupid face, and like it literally got 300,000 views. I was like, it was so undermining to like the entire experience of dumping my heart into so much work and like all this cool shit I've done. It's like, oh, the dumbass video I took three seconds to think about and 15 seconds to shoot gets 300,000 views because this algorithm wants to serve it. I was like, this is fucking stupid. Like I didn't, it served to piss me off worse than none of my stuff getting seen. Like it was pretty awesome. Maybe such is life.
Yeah. So my advice with that, like I said earlier, is just focus on what you can do offline, because trying to appease the algorithm is going to be a fool's errand. Like it's just not, because the algorithm is shifting all the time based on different things that you have no control over. And so what might have been working before now is not going to work, maybe a week from now or 2 weeks from now. That's another thing I see where people say, I was doing this one thing and I'm not getting any views, so let me switch it up and do something different. And like, it's not even so much that there's creativity in it as much as, again, they're not really trying to appease their fans or their audience. It's like, what can I do so the algorithm will notice me? Like, it's sort of, like, it's like the kid that's trying to get their mom's attention. Like, mama, like it's that sort of thing that's happening. See what you can do to cultivate that creative spark offline.
Yeah. I think bundling all that up, right? Like if you listen to what Maurice says and you follow your passion and you create that spark and build those communities everywhere, and you post it online, but like that's not the mission, right? The mission isn't likes. When one day, when one of the things you make is dope and you've been getting the right feedback from the people that will actually eventually see it because you've been talking to them in person and networking and all that sort of stuff, you get that piece, they'll see all of your other stuff and it'll all happen for you, right? Like, like that's kind of what Ross was saying, like, hey, this guy's an overnight success. You go back, but like last week, nothing he had any views. Like, so, but that one piece went viral, and now everybody. It's like that Anthony Oliver, I think his name. That he's like a folky guitar singer from Richmond,
Richmond, north of Richmond.
Yeah, no one ever heard of him a month ago, and now all of his views have hundreds of thousands of views.
I heard him on the radio.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, but like just like a month ago was nobody, and now he's been on like Joe Rogan's podcast and like all kinds of stuff. His shit was always great. He's been posting for forever, and now he's everywhere, right? Which is pretty cool. So I don't know, it's just interesting tying that all in. So I think you're absolutely right, Maurice. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people in person about my work and about what I'm doing. And like, you know, when I went out to this blockchain convention, and that really fuels you to keep moving, because you can't fail if you never quit. And if you're doing shit for the right reasons, then you never quit, right? Like you just love it. It's a passion. It's part of you as a human being. So let the creativity out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think finding who you are as a creative and sticking to that rather than, like you said, pivoting based on your exposure, your perceived exposure online.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely step one in having like a really solid career in any sort of design path.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. So we're
another kind of corollary to that too. Also, I know we're gonna move on from that.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Also, the social media places are now just starting to become these walled gardens where, unless you also happen to be on Twitter/X or on Instagram. I mean, Instagram hasn't done this yet, hopefully, knock on wood, where like you have to be logged in and be a member in order to see anything. So then that sort of tamps down, whatever concept of virality there might be for the work that you have. Because, yeah, people may see it on one platform, they're not seeing it on this other platform. And, it's a whole thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately.
So we are coming up on time, but before we wrap, I do have one last question for you. Is there anyone or anything in your career that you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe that's a mentor, a valuable resource, a favorite client, something like that.
Oh, that's a good question. I'll give two if that's okay.
Yeah.
First one, and like we literally just spoke last night, is my best friend, Dr. Chris Stewart. He's professor at Ohio State University. He teaches computer science. Definitely want to shout him out. I've known Chris. Chris has known me before I was all of this. So Chris has known me when I was just a scrub from Alabama that just made it to Georgia, and was just trying to like get through college. And that is like my best friend to this day. So definitely want to shout him out. Also want to shout out my mentor, Husani Oakley. Husani is, I've known Husani probably about as long as I've known Chris, but Husani has been like this huge creative force. He has worked in advertising. He was a former CTO at Deutsch New York. He most recently was director of creative practices at Netflix. Like, he's someone that I always look up to him in terms of his career and the impact that his work has had. And he's someone that I'm, proud to call a mentor, proud to call a friend. So definitely both of them a shout.
Amazing. Awesome, man. And give a big thank you to Julie Annixter when she was the president of AIGA, because she's the one that actually got you and I connected the first time at that little meetup in Atlanta. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah,
dude, way back when? What was that, like 2018, 2019, something like that?
Oh, that was way before. I think that was maybe like 20. Let's see, if Julie was maybe 2014, 2015, something like that.
Man, I don't even know.
Oh, it was a while ago, definitely.
Yeah. It's been a minute, so cool, man.
Yeah, since then we've done not one, but two commercials for Revision Path for you. So
yes.
Oh, yeah. Cool. So we've been talking with Maurice Cherry, who's the principal and creative director at Lunch and the founder and host of Revision Path. You can check out their website at yepitslunch.com. Love that, by the way. Or revisionpath.com, right?
Yeah, revisionpath.com is the podcast. And then yepitslunch.com is kind of in this sort of weird transitory state right now.
Gotcha.
Mainly because it's been, I'd say for the past few years, because I've worked for startups, it's been just like a single person consultancy for a while. And so if you go to yepitslunch.com, you'll see basically the projects that I've done.
Yeah.
I'm in the midst of revamping it to try to make it a bit more client side, because I'm thinking of moving back into kind of that entrepreneurial space now, because the job market is trash.
Mhm.
It is.
Absolute trash.
It is.
Come on back.
Gotta pivot into that.
Come on back to the entrepreneur space. We'll take you back anytime.
And I guess speaking of, if anyone wants to follow up with you directly, where should they go?
I am mostly on LinkedIn these days. I mean, I do have a Twitter account, Twitter/X. It's Maurice.
It's fine.
At Maurice Cherry is fine. Although I don't check that very often. But I'm mostly on LinkedIn because I do use LinkedIn also to source for Vision Pass. If you contact me there, that's probably the best method.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, we've been talking with. Sorry, Ross just said that. Anyways, all right. All right.
I swear this is not our
Dude,
first episode.
I'm having a rough one today. Anyways.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Thank you all for tuning in today. Maurice, it was great chatting with you as always, friend. And we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Peace.
All right.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.